Breaking Dawn by Stephanie Meyer. Chapter 5. I sat down on the cool tile floor on my big towel and put my head between my knees. I prayed he wouldn't decide to come and look for me before I could pull myself together. I can imagine what he would think if he saw me going to pieces this way. It wouldn't be hard for him to convince himself that we were making a mistake. I wasn't freaking out because I thought we were making a mistake. Not at all. I was freaking out because I had no idea how to do this, and I was afraid to walk out of this room and face the unknown, especially in French lingerie. I knew I wasn't ready for that yet. This felt exactly like trying to walk out in front of the theatre full of thousands with no idea what my lines were. How do people do this? Swallow all their fears and trust someone else so implicitly, with every imperfection and fear they had, with less than absolute commitment Edward had given me. If it wasn't Edward out there, I didn't know how in every cell of my body that he loved me as much as I loved him, unconditionally and irrevocably, and to be honest, irrationally. I'd never be able to get up off this floor. But it was Edward out there, so I whispered the words, "Don't be a coward," under my breath, and scrambled to my feet. I hitched a towel tight under my arms and marched determinedly from the bathroom, past a suitcase full of lace into the big bed without looking at either, out the open glass doors onto the powder-fine sand. Everything was black and white, bleached colourless by the moon. I walked slowly across the warm powder, pausing behind the curved tree where he had left his clothes. I laid my hand against the rough bark and checked my breathing to make sure it was even, or even enough. I looked across the low ripples, black in the darkness, searching for him. He wasn't hard to find. He stood, his back to me, waist deep in the midnight water, staring up at the oval moon. It was the pallid light of the moon turned his skin a perfect white, like the sand, like the moon itself, and made his wet hair black as the ocean. He was motionless, his hands resting palms down against the water. The low waves broke around him as if he were stone. I looked at the smooth lines of his back, his shoulders, his arms, his neck, the flawless shape of him. The fire was no longer a flesh burn across my skin. It was slow and deep now. It smouldered away all my awkwardness, my shy uncertainty. I slipped the towel off without hesitation, leaving it on the tree with his clothes, and walked out into the white lights. It made me pale as a snowy sand too. I couldn't hear the sound of my footsteps as I walked to the water's edge, but I guessed that he could. Edward did not turn. I let the gentle swirls break over my toes, and found that he had been right about the temperature. It was very warm, like bath water. I stepped in, walking carefully across the invisible ocean floor, but my care was unnecessary. The sand continued perfectly smooth, sloping gently towards Edward's. I waded through the weightless current until I was at his side, and then placed my hand lightly over his cool hand lying on the water. "Beautiful," I said, looking up at the moon too. "It's all right," he answered, unimpressed. He turned slowly to face me. Little waves rolled away from his movement and broke against my skin. His eyes looked silver in his ice-coloured face. He twisted his hand up so that he could twine our fingers between the surface of the water. It was warm enough that his cool skin did not raise goosebumps on mine. "But I wouldn't use the word beautiful," he continued. "Not with you standing here in comparison." I half smiled and raised my free hand. It didn't tremble now, and placed it over his heart. White on white, we matched for once. He shoved the tiniest bit at my warm touch. His breath came rougher now. "I promised we would try," he whispered, suddenly tense. If I did something wrong, if I hurt you, you must tell me at once." I nodded solemnly, keeping my eyes on his. I took another step through the waves and leaned my hand against his chest. "Don't be afraid," I murmured. "We belong together." I was abruptly overwhelmed by the truth of my own words. This moment was so perfect, so right, there was no way to doubt it. His arms wrapped around me, holding me against him. Summer and winter. It felt like every nerve ending in my body was a live wire. "Forever," he agreed, then pulled us gently into deeper water. The sun, hot on the bare skin of my back, woke me in the morning. Late morning, maybe afternoon. I wasn't sure. Everything besides the time was clear, though. I knew exactly where I was. In the bright room with the big white bed, brilliant sunlight streaming through the open doors. The clouds of netting were soon soften the shine. I didn't open my eyes. I was too happy to change anything, no matter how small. The only sounds were the waves outside, our breathing, my heartbeat. I was comfortable, even with the baking sun. His cool skin was a perfect antidote to the heat. Lying across his wintry chest, his arms wound around me, felt very easy and natural. I wondered idly what I'd been so panicky about last night. My fears all seemed silly now. His fingers softly trailed down the contours of my spine, and I knew that he knew I was awake. I kept my eyes shut and I tightened my arms around his neck, holding myself closer to him. He didn't speak. His fingers moved up and down my back, barely touching it as he lightly traced patterns on my skin. I would have happy to have lie here forever, to never disturb this moment, but my body had other ideas. I laughed at my impatient stomach. It seemed sort of prosaic to be hungry after all that had passed last night, like being brought back down to earth from some great height. "What's funny?" he murmured, still stroking my back. Just the sound of his voice, serious and husky, brought with a deluge of memories from the night, and I felt a rush of colour in my face and neck. To answer his question, my stomach growled. I laughed again. You just can't escape being human for very long." I waited, but he did not laugh with me. Slowly sinking through the many layers of bliss that clouded my head came the realization of different atmosphere outside my own glowing sphere of happiness. I opened my eyes. The first thing I saw was the pale, almost silvery skin of his throat, at the arc of his chin above my face. His jaw was taut. I propped myself up on my elbow so I could see his face. He was staring at the frothy company above us, and he didn't look at me as I studied his grey features. His expression was shock. It sent a physical jolt through my body. "Edward," I said, a strange little catch in my throat. "What is it? What's wrong?" "You have to ask." His voice was hard, cynical. My first instinct, the product of a lifetime of insecurities, was to wonder what I had done wrong. I thought through everything that had happened, but I couldn't find any sour note in the memory. It had all been simpler than I had expected. We fit together like corresponding pieces, made to match up. This had given me a secret satisfaction. We were compatible, physically and as well as other ways. Fire and ice, somehow existing together without destroying each other, more proof that I belonged with him. I couldn't think of any part that would make him look like this. So severe and cold. What had I missed? His fingers smoothed the worried lines on my forehead. "What are you thinking?" he whispered. "You're upset. I don't understand. Did I—" I couldn't finish. His eyes tightened. "How badly are you hurt, Bella? The truth. Don't try to downplay it." "Hurt?" I repeated. My voice came up higher than usual because the words took me so by surprise. He raised one eyebrow, his lips a tight line. He made a quick assessment, stretching my body automatically, tensing and flexing my muscles. There was a stiffness and a lot of soreness too. It was true, but mostly there was an odd sensation that my bones had all become unhinged at the joints, and I had changed halfway into the consistency of a jellyfish. It was not an unpleasant feeling. I was a little angry because he was darkening this most perfect of all mornings with his pessimistic assumptions. Why would you jump to that conclusion? I've never been better than I am now." His eyes closed. "Stop that." "Stop what?" "Stop acting like I'm a monster for not having agreed to this." "Edward," I whispered, really upset now. He was pulling my bright memory through the darkness, staining it. "Don't ever say that." He didn't open his eyes. It was like he didn't want to see me. "Look at yourself, Bella. Then tell me I'm not a monster." Wounded, shocked, I followed his instruction unthinkingly and then gasped.